Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around for the first half hour. We're here with friend of the show, Michael Libby, esteemed liberal crank. If I can get away with that, crank. Well, see, it's worse when people call me that because I haven't had as much time to get grumpy, but I'm about as grumpy as they come. Although I just got back on Sunday night from a little 5-day solo backpack cabbie trip to northern Minnesota and southern Canada with my lovely dog Nora. We did some great hiking around, and it reset. And it basically, being on nature by myself, restored my faith in humanity that people are basically good and that I can get along with folks. So that was worth the time. I will tell you that. There you go. Speaking of all things good, decent, and holy, the Republican Party is in some kind of crazy disarray. And I'm gonna, before we get into some of the new developments about the speakership that's up for grabs because Kevin McCarthy dropped out and they can't pick a leader to save their lives because it doesn't seem like they're really interested in governing. I'm curious to get your broad take on the Republican presidential race so far.
Hold on, I'm tweeting out the fact that we're doing this.
Oh, so. Well, you know what? I'll give you my take. It's just a complete mess. The only guy that seems like he has a serious chance on kind of riding out the Trump Circus Act seems like it's Marco Rubio. It feels like the rest of them are going to fall off, except that whenever, and you hear from these Beltway pundits about how impressive Rubio is, how prepared he is, how he really is able to articulate the conservative principles that we've been hearing articulated for the last 45 years. Talk about new and fresh. You package up old cheese in a new package. Right. It's still old cheese. But he seems like the only one that's going to come out of this. And I just, don't they leave themselves open to these attacks that they leveled against Senator Obama back in 2008?
Sure. Here's the bottom line is that the Republicans are not going to win the presidential election. They are not going to win. And they're not going to win because they are not going to get the support of the minority community in this nation. There is not a brown person, there's not a black person, and maybe a couple of yellow folks that might vote for a Republican or two, but they are not going to win the presidential election. And the reason that they're not going to win is that their appeal is so narrow. They have embraced what's called austerity spending in Congress, and in all of these presidential candidates are talking about austerity spending. Let me tell you where austerity spending gets us. It gets us with broken roads and broken bridges and no work and individuals who, look, we've got a governor in this state that was going to be handed millions of dollars for a study project for high-speed rail between Chicago and Davenport to Iowa City to Des Moines to Omaha.
There aren't any people who live on that route, though.
Well, no, but
or who would be interested in going to Chicago.
Of course, there's nobody in that route that would be interested in that. But he said no. He said no to the millions of dollars because he thought it was going to be a boondoggle, and he also thought it was going to be a win-win for the unions. I'm telling you that the Republicans are not going to win because they do not have the best interests of the majority of American citizens at heart. This austerity programming with regard to the budget is a failure. I mean, we can see it in what's going on all across the country. When I'm an old guy, and when I was growing up in the 1950s and 1960s, we had a president by the name of Eisenhower, who played golf most of the time, quite frankly.
Well, he won World War II.
He also, so then he played golf. What the hell? But here's a guy who is so well beloved by both Democrats and Republicans. That we went on a building spree across this nation, and today there is an entire interstate highway system named after President Eisenhower. We spent billions of dollars in 2015 money on infrastructure. We're not doing that,
and it changed. And this is what is really important to remember. It changed the face of the country, not just in terms of being able to travel from one section of the country to another, but commerce, culture, the whole thing. Yeah. It connected us in a way that it wasn't possible before. My business partner, who's a really smart guy and reads a lot of really smart books, is reading a book. I can't remember the title of it, but it's basically a travel memoir of the United States and how And this guy's central argument is that most of the travel books that you read are about like the traveler's harrowing, these nonfiction books about the traveler's harrowing experiences on the road or these things. And he wants to debunk that by saying, yeah, you might have a problem in a big city, in a Des Moines maybe, or a Chicago or a Minneapolis, if you get into a part of the city that maybe isn't as safe as other parts are. But point A to point B is about as safe as it gets. There are no more dangers traveling this country from point A to point B.
Well, not yet, but here's another issue.
But that's
because of the interstate system,
infrastructure. Yeah.
Well, and so here's another. Let's fast forward this to 2015. We are having dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of air traffic controllers retiring now because they're at the age that they're getting out, and the government is not replacing these people.
Nope.
And so again, we come back on this austerity budgeting program, which is absolutely a disaster for this country, and we're not funding correctly all of these these important programs. Mm-hmm. And so what happens to commerce? All right, I'm a business guy, I get it. What happens to commerce when we don't have enough air traffic controllers? Things get bottled up, things don't move. Look, we saw what happened with a dock workers' strike on the West Coast.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And
crippled the economy.
And the refusal to negotiate common sense collective bargaining by anybody in any kind of power. The lifeblood of the manufacturing sector that's basically gone,
eviscerated
at this point. The lifeblood of the infrastructure of this country is built on workers being able to collectively bargain against management. That's a core liberal principle, and we've seen, and this is the one problem when the liberals get a little bit, I don't want to say squishy, but when our own schizophrenia starts to show, is that battle between labor and just about everybody else, every other interest group in the liberal tent, the environmentalists or the actually that's the big one. When labor and the environment get together, it can make us a little bit confused with the message is, but it is so important that is maintained and supported, and you have one side of politics that is okay with it. You have one side that is so against it, even though he didn't do very well. They were willing to elevate a guy who compared those sorts of workers and Scott Walker to ISIS. That's where we are on the right side of politics in this country.
Well, we bring up the point of collective bargaining in this country, and because the unions have been eviscerated, we've seen the middle class start to shrink.
Yep.
Now, what's astounding to me, and I get to talk with people on all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, is when I'm talking to individuals who are from a very modest socioeconomic background, and they are anti-union, I hate the unions with a passion. And I say, why is that? Well, because they force me to pay union dues, and I can't afford to pay union dues. Well, what do you mean you can't afford to pay? If you didn't have the union, then you'd really be in trouble, because look at some of these places that have kicked the unions out. And so wages go down. Look, unions built this middle class in this nation, built the middle class in this nation. And we can point a finger to the timeline when the unions started to lose a lot of their control and they started to decline. So too did the middle class decline. And so those individuals that are on a modest socioeconomic scale here in this country ought to be, more than anybody else, beating the drum for the union rather than taking up the charge for some of these people on the far right.
And I've got some thoughts about why that is. We've got another break coming up here, so we're going to get to that. Please check out the sponsors in all of our breaks here this evening, and be back with myself and Michael Libby right after this.